All right. Good evening and welcome to the Hanson Select Board meeting of Tuesday, March 26th. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to take things out of order tonight because that's the way we are. So we're going to enter executive session and try to be out of executive session by 6 o'clock, at which point we will then talk about the potential school override. So I will entertain a motion to enter executive session pursuant to Open Meeting Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, Deputy Chief Highway Director, Town Administrator, and then executive session pursuant to Open Meeting Law, Chapter Section 21A3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares, union negotiations with highway administration, police, and fire. And in the interest of full disclosure, we may not be able to get through all of that in a half an hour, but I will nevertheless entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And we will be convening an open session after executive session. Okay, sorry about that, Nicole.
But there's only two of these.
Okay, and welcome back to our Tuesday, March 26th, 2024 meeting where all pandemonium has broken loose, and we're going to try to pull things back into order. With that, Mrs. Rain, I'm going to turn it over to you for the public announcements and upcoming meetings.
Which have been mercifully shortened finally. We are looking for citizens at large to become members of the following committees: the Bylaw Committee, Cable and Internet Committee, Community Preservation Committee, Capital Improvement Committee, Cultural Council, Economic Development Committee, Energy Committee, Historical Commission, Laquan Reuse Committee, the Memorial Day and Patriotic Observance Committee, Recreation Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Volunteer applications may be found on the town website, www.hanson-ma.gov, or by calling the Select Board's office at 781-293-2131. Upcoming meetings: Select Board April 9th, 2024, Select Board April 23rd, 2024, and the Select Board May 6th, 2024, the special and annual town meeting.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. That brings us to a discussion regarding possible school override. Ms. Green.
Okay, yes, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board. The Whitman-Hanson Regional School District School Committee met last Wednesday to discuss voting on their budget and the assessment to the town. After many conversations that Town Administrator Mary Beth Carter of Whitman and myself had with Superintendent, we really voiced our ability to afford 5% assessment. Then we did have a meeting with the superintendent, the chair of the school committee, Beth Stafford, and again, we did talk about being able to afford 5% on both towns. It was very unfortunate after attending the meeting last week, the school committee meeting last Wednesday, to see that the committee did not take into consideration any of Superintendent Zymanak's scenarios for lowering the assessment, which would included using some of their excess and deficiency, E&D, possibly some of their circuit breaker, cutting some positions, which would have brought the assessments down, not to where they were starting to go in the right direction, but they came down to the 6.69, 7.68, and then they had a 5% scenario. The committee, after much discussion, voted not to not to incorporate any of Superintendent Simonak's scenarios, not to use any of the excess and deficiency for, towards their budget, and basically voted the assessment to the towns at, I believe, 10.2% for Hanson and then 11.88% for Whitman. So after working with our town accountant, Eric Kinshirf, we worked out some of the various numbers of what that type of assessment does mean to the town. It's roughly $15,532,479 as an assessment to the town, and it's roughly around $20 million for Whitman. Our free cash amount is only 1.486. So obviously, basically that shortfall, and what that assessment does is that brings us at a shortfall of $1,579,947 between basically the 5% and then the 10.2%. Obviously, we don't have enough free cash to cover that amount.
Right.
So there is a need to find $723,176 somewhere.
Doesn't Whitman School have that?
The Whitman School?
They have.
I mean, the Whitman, the school department? Do they have free cash?
They have some, but they're in the same, they're basically in the same situation. They don't have enough free cash to cover that kind of an assessment.
I think he's asking if the school district has
He's
that
asking about
money.
the school district.
They have free cash.
Yeah, yes.
What Eric talked about
I believe
last time.
they do have about around 700,000 in their excess and deficiency.
They can't use that?
They did
The
not,
school committee voted not to
they
use
did
any
not
of
vote
it
to
towards
use
their
any
budget.
circuit breaker
Last
or
Wednesday.
excess and deficiency.
I believe that the superintendent did suggest and offer a scenario of using up to $250,000 in the excess and deficiency towards the budget, but the school committee voted not to use any of it, any of their free cash, so to speak, towards their budget.
May I? I'm a neophyte to all this, but it just seems to me to be extremely, I don't know what the word is, arrogant comes to mind, to ask the towns to cut other budgets and not even take a glance at what they could have cut and come up with those numbers to us. I don't understand that kind of attitude in this day, especially in this day and age, when everything has done nothing but go up, and we're just supposed to pull it out of somewhere. That to me is ludicrous. Sorry.
No, I mean, no need to apologize, but
Ludicrous.
I will say that Jeff Simonek did present several scenarios in which some programming would be cut, in which some excess and deficiency and circuit breaker money
Oh, I'm
would
not
be
saying him, it's
would be
the board.
used,
The
but
board said
the
no.
school committee didn't entertain
I know.
those options, and so that's where we're at now. So
that leaves us in a position of figuring out where we're going to come up with $723,176 and a school override. An override for that money for the schools is one of our options. And I believe Whitman is having almost the same conversation tonight with their select board meeting.
And them giving any money is like out of the question?
it's not out of the question, but we have a very short runway right now. As we discussed with town clerk timing and with our timing, we've got to make a decision and lock down our warrant really within the next week in order for us to be able to, to do this. So there are going to be some further conversations. I feel hopeful that the dollar amount might be reduced, but it's hard to say what that dollar amount will be reduced by. So we are dealing with the most severe case, which is what's before us, which is the 10.2 without them using excess and deficiency or circuit breaker and without any further movement from the school committee. And we're trying to make a decision based on this most severe case. What are our options? Now, if we don't do an override, it's the changes are fairly draconian. I'll be quite honest. You're looking at library, town hall employees, obviously some fire and police would be impacted. We don't really, I personally don't want to even talk about those types of, like, we would be talking about absolutely crippling the operations at town hall. Most of the positions that people take for granted, that we have like a full-time building person in the building department, conservation, Board of Health, all of these departments.
Why do we have to cut on our side? The school department, the school doesn't have to cut on
because
anything.
we are not the school committee. All we can do, their job is to give us the assessment and for us to either say, so Lisa will get into this, but so if we want to say, no, we don't accept what you're saying, and we told you 5%, and that's what we meant, then the way for us to do that would be for us to have a budget that's 5% in the warrant, and then present their budget, but contingent on an override happening. And if the override doesn't happen, and I'm simplifying this because we are a regional district and we get into all kinds of stuff with Whitman, but if Whitman takes a similar approach and the overrides don't pass, then the school will not get the 10.2, and they will be required to make cuts based on the 5%, if that's what we decide we're going to put into the warrant. If the override does pass, then they will get what it is that they want and what they've proposed at the 10.2. I think it probably will be somewhere in the middle. As I said, I do feel hopeful that they will come down a bit, but even if they come down a bit, we literally cannot afford anything more than 5%. We weren't exaggerating, we weren't being dramatic, we cannot afford any more than that. And even with that, we're making cuts and we're limiting spending severely. And you guys know we had John Madden here giving us our financial forecast a couple weeks ago, or it might have been last week, it's all a blur. And so you know where we're at.
I'm still at the 3.8.
We know where you're at.
We were
yeah.
hopeful that they were going to go to the 6 point whatever it was, but they didn't.
No.
Our hope is not getting us anywhere.
No. So again, Whitman is meeting tonight. I believe that they're having the same conversation that we're having, which is having the school override, a contingency override for the school. That's wrapped up. So if that's what the school committee wants to vote on, then they will it will be all contingent upon whether the voters decide, both at town meeting and then at the ballot, whether they want to do that override. And so be it. The voters have spoken, and then we will spend the money accordingly. But what we're saying is all we have is 5%. And even that is a stretch. To be quite honest with you, and back to your point, Mr. George, what we had originally talked about that we were comfortable with and allowing very, very moderate growth and even negotiation with the unions was the 3.8%. With this 5%, we now have to sort of try to deal in good faith with the unions and say, we don't know what our financial situation is going to look like next year. We really have to take that into consideration in the middle of the negotiation. And we can't really get into negotiations because we're not through them yet, but just, it's not a great place to be as we're entering into negotiations with all of our unions this year. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I hear what you're saying. We can't make the school committee do anything.
Right. Okay, no,
I have had conversations with the school committee chair. She has had conversations with the superintendent. Ms. Green has had conversations with the superintendent, really starting in like September, October. And even last year we said, look, next year we're not going to be able to afford much. We're thinking, Whitman's saying 5, which is kind of how we came at the 5, because if we don't arrive at the same amount, then we end up at a super town meeting in 1/12. So we're going to try to stretch because that's what Whitman's saying. They'll come down from what they can really afford. We'll go up a little and we'll meet in the middle. And again, I'm not saying it's the superintendent, and I'm not trying to throw pot shots at anybody, but I honestly have to say, in terms of all of the years that I've been on this select board, we could not have been clearer any earlier than we were this year. We couldn't have, and we haven't been. This year, we were crystal clear about what our financial prospects were, and we were very clear with the communication channels on all levels, with our FinCom, with, Mr. Sullivan will tell you, Ms. Green will tell you, we've been firing on all engines, keeping the communication going. So it is not for lack of communication. I just think that if you watch the school committee meeting, they feel very impassioned.
I just find it funny that they hired a lot of people over there that are not teachers that they don't want to lay off. They got something that they can't afford, just like if I bought something I can't afford, I'm going to get rid of it. They have people over there that obviously they can't afford them, and they want to retain them. I don't know what to tell you. Nobody wants to get laid off, but
no, I agree.
We shouldn't have to lay off our police and fire department and people inside this town hall so that they can keep all the fat on the time card over there.
And so I, in principle, agree with some of what you're saying. What I will say is that's why we are saying you've taken the position as an elected official, school committee elected official. You guys have taken that vote. It was a majority vote. There was one dissenting vote. 8 people voted for that budget out of 9. And so they've taken a stand, and that's, they're doing what they believe is their mission, what their job is, what they were elected to do. And our job is to respond and say, we are responsible for managing the town's budget.
Right, okay.
You're asking for this lift, this heavy lift. We don't have that money.
Right.
If you want that money, we have to go to an override for just the school, because we don't need it for the town budget. We were fine.
Right.
If we had stuck with the 5, we would have been fine. Tight, but we would have been okay. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that they feel as though they had reasons for doing what they did, and I did take a vow a couple of weeks ago, you guys, that I wasn't going to take shots across the bow. So I'm really, really like doing a namaste type of moment here, and keeping true to my word. Ms. Green, what else one other thing I did want to say is after this vote was taken, I did call Mr. Kowalski, the chair of the Whitman Select Board, and Ms. Stafford, and I said, do you want to get together and just talk about, is there any potential that any of our groups could come closer together and get this number down? I don't know that will work, but I'm willing to try anything.
Did they agree?
They agreed to have a meeting the Monday after Easter. It will just be the 2 town administrators, the superintendent, Chairman Kowalski, Chairman Stafford, and me. And again, I'm not going to speak for you guys. I'm just going to take back whatever is said and take it under advisement and bring it back to you, because we act as a board.
Right.
But I think I'm just hopeful that if we can keep this dialogue going and try to keep the lines of communication open without taking irreversible actions and saying things that, because we've got to work with them. I want to try to work with them, that we may get to a better point. It certainly can't get worse, because that's the 10.2 was DEFCON.
That's a lot.
So it can't get worse. So that's where we're at. Ms. Green, what else did you want to say about your discussions with Mr. Kinshirf and others?
We basically put there's a chart that we have that we can put up on the website that will give residents an idea of the impact on their real estate property tax for this particular override. So we'll put this up on the website so people can look and see. What it does is it takes the average single-family assessed value for FY24, which is $499,873, and then it will, says what the average tax bill would be. It would bring the tax bill up to $6,688, which is approximately $179.75 annually. That's an annual increase.
And this is for the $723,000.
That's the $723,176.
Okay.
That is right. So, I mean, we basically started it at a $250,000 value and went all the way to 1.5 million. So we have that chart. So this will give folks a good idea of what the increase on their annual tax bill would be, not quarterly, not monthly, but annually, their yearly amount.
And
We
that's
need to.
based on what they just voted on last night?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yes.
Last Wednesday.
That's Wednesday, yes. We do need to vote tonight to see if the board wants to put the override question on the ballot, because we do need to present to the town clerk the exact language for the ballot by April 12th, so she can get it on. And then we will need to put in we will need to prepare two budgets for the town meeting, two articles for town meeting. So there's a lot of work to be done from today going forward to prepare everybody for this.
Mr. Sullivan, thoughts? And just for those who don't know you, if you can state who you are and what your position is.
Yes, Kevin Sullivan, Chairman of the Finance Committee for the town of Hanson. I think we're back where we said we were going to be last year. We heard Mr. Madden say 5 million is the number. I think the schools have made themselves, they're not willing to be a rational partner, in my opinion. They've had us now for the past few years, and they're just going to keep grinding us up. I don't know why. I don't know how this went from such a cordial relationship over the 13 years, 12 years I've been doing this. We never had this kind of problem, and now, they're putting everyone in a tight position. The voters, the people who are out there, cost increase across the board. You said April 12th is when we have to have it done.
Well, that's when the ballot question needs to be presented to the town clerk.
So that's
yes.
the drop dead date.
That's the drop dead date, yep.
I don't know. We could wait. Keep going. See if they come down. I mean, we could play a very dangerous game of chicken with the entire process and see what happens. And if they're willing to come to the table and talk, I just think we're going to need an override if we need override this year, it's going to be another override next year. And it's going to be another override next year. The math just doesn't hold up in the long run. Mm-hmm. And that's why Mr. Madden, it seemed shocking, but for so many years we were so far, we kept things very conservative. So do we look at 3 successive overrides and burn the whole town out? Or do we wait next year and do a larger override and hope that we can come to an agreement with Hanson Regional School District to come down even halfway to the 5, or any, as you said, any relief will help. I just don't know, yes, we can build in contingencies, but I think that the meeting you're talking about where you have the conversation is where we have it before we commit to an override. I just think we can keep going. And we've got a little bit of time, not a ton of time. But multiple budgets really going up against it is going to be tough. We can force them to. I mean, has Whitman agreed to the number they're being given, or they're going to have to do an override?
They're taking the same steps. My
Okay, so they're doing
understanding,
the exact same
they're doing the same thing we're doing
So
tonight.
the final option is to send it to a super town meeting.
Are they at the 5% too?
They are, yes. Everything we discussed tonight is my
So the
understanding.
battle we're fighting here, they're fighting over here.
They're fighting the same battle.
So, I
Yep.
mean, there's always the
Yep.
option of going to
And the
super
school-
town meeting
and the school don't
forcing
wanna
them to a
budge.
1/12 budget, to start off the year until we can settle it out, which forcing them to a 1/12 budget looks bad on everyone, right? It's frowned upon across the board.
Well, and at a certain point, the state steps in if
Correct.
that ends up
Correct.
happening.
And the
So,
state also steps in and looks at the problem.
so I think, one of the things, people have been saying is, well, slash the town budgets. There's not a lot of town budget to slash, and quite honestly, this board and prior boards have worked extremely hard to get a professional town hall that is getting grants, that is getting good services out there to constituents, that is keeping the roads, clean, that's keeping people safe. We don't have overstaffing in our police and fire, and I don't want to tell people really where we're at, because at some point people might get a little panicky, honestly, if they knew how thinly staffed we were at times. So I really, those keyboard warriors that seem to think that we've got all kinds of fat on the bone, I would defy you to come in and take a look at the actual numbers and take a look at the operations at Town Hall, spend some time with Miss Green to find out how we're running things, and you will be surprised. And as Mrs. Rain, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but last year, Mrs. Rain said, wow, it looks a lot different on this side of the table than it did on the other side.
Sure does.
What everyone forgets is when you talk about town government, I mean, Ms. Green, how many people work in this town hall? 15? About that? 15 people.
15.
I mean, a lot of these departments are 1 and 2.
6 guys in highway, 6 highway.
And
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about over the past 11 years we've been doing this, we had made significant cuts. We were down to a 3-shift fire department. We built it up and incorporated that because that's what the town needed for, we were on the verge of having some safety issues. We're back where our police and fire are at the level they need to support the town and provide the services they need. So when you look to town hall and say, oh, we're going to cut it from town hall, well, there's just not money in town hall. There's not, there's 2 people in the town clerk's office. So you're going to get rid of one of them? It's
There's 3 in the select board's office. Oh my goodness! And it's
Well, not even full-time.
not even full time.
No.
But that's my point, is there's just not, I think we did the math one time, that, each person you cut from the budget equates to about $90,000 in savings. So even if we spent the free cash and still had 100-something, you're losing something.
And you still have to have unemployment costs too,
Correct.
so you gotta think about all of it.
Again, that was a
Yep.
rough sort of math exercise we did, but that's how you sort of got to that number, is you just start. But you can't, town hall's the smallest department. The police and fire, no one wants to cut them, so there's nowhere to, the money doesn't exist.
No.
There's no, I wish there was a magical, spot where we keep all this hidden, but our budget is very transparent. It's out there on the web. The town administrator puts it out, the town accountant,
Yes.
we all put it out. It's there. There's no magic to it.
I was hoping that our town accountant would be here tonight because just for another exercise, I had read the article from one of the FinCom members in Whitman.
Oh, boy.
I know, but she was, she brought to mind that they had monies in an unreserved, undesignated fund and an enterprise retained earnings fund, and I didn't know if we had any little funds like that crawling around. We have nothing.
To be honest, what we've done over the past few years is we've closed a lot of these accounts.
Oh, okay. So we had them and they're gone.
When I first started the line of accounting, there were hundreds of lines of accounting that just everything, pencils had its own line of accounting. And we've trimmed them down. We've gotten rid of some of these revolving accounts that we just said it doesn't make sense to keep funding these and have to go to town meeting and argue about it. It's a budget line item, just put them in there. So there really isn't, there's no, the free cash is it.
Right.
That's where all the money flows.
And the stabilization fund, we have that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Stabilization is directly tied to our bond rating.
Right.
You do not want to.
No, I know that, but I mean, that's like...
That's the only other
Yeah.
misconception people have with regard to stabilization, but stabilization ruins your bond rating. You won't be able to borrow.
Right.
Except
You pay for it in the long run.
incredibly
Yeah.
high rates.
Yeah.
And sometimes not at all, depending on the size of the borrowing you want to do. We're lucky to have this amount of free cash, but there's just no way. We've shown the budget every year and said there's nothing. I can trim 10,000, even when we go through the numbers and do it from an exercise standpoint, without affecting headcount and anything contractual.
Yep. So, Mr. Hill, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
What you mentioned a few minutes ago about waiting before we start the process. Is there any benefit to waiting before we start the process of?
Well, here's my thought on that, Mr. Gill, is I think, you know, I appreciate Ms. McDowell and Ms. Green's agility, but I don't think we necessarily want to test their agility. So I think, I hear what Mr. Sullivan is saying, and I do appreciate that probably before we literally pull the trigger and take the vote, we may want to wait. But in the interim, I'm thinking we want to make preparations as though we might have to do that. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but I you know, and I know you've kind of already been laying the foundation and given some thought and talking to Mr. Kinshirf and, you know, thinking about how it needs to look and what have you.
Madam Chair, if I may, I would like just to make a correction on the announcements. The board actually has a meeting April 2nd.
I thought you said
It said in the 9th, right? Isn't it April 2nd?
Do we have a meeting next weekend?
We do have one April 2nd. We knew that.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, we knew that.
you know, if it's the will of the board to go that direction tonight, as you know, we will be meeting. There's an opportunity to continue the discussion on the 2nd, because then that would still give us time to meet that April 12th deadline. So just, you know, and just to piggyback on Chairman Sullivan's talk about town hall, when you work in town hall every day, you see the departments that are two departments, and a lot of those departments are our land planning, building, our conservation, our health. You know, those department heads, they're out doing inspections, which leaves one person in the department. And when you do have a vacation or a sick day, the department literally is closed when those inspectors are out doing inspections and things like that.
Not only that, I would say that we have a lot of activity as of late in that regard, and there are a lot of regulations in terms of turnaround time and responses on land use.
That's
you
right.
know,
It's putting
pieces.
a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on people that can lead to burnout very quickly. So
Yeah. So, okay. So I think what I'm kind of hearing is you guys appreciate where we're at. Well, appreciate might not be the right word. You understand where we're at, and that if we are going to have no compromise struck or lowering of this assessment, that if we're to do an override, we would be doing a school override, contingency school override. But it's too early for us to
And we would be
really,
basing that on a 5% budget line in our budget.
in the absence of that contingency override. Yep.
Right,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Because I am not going to vote for going over 5%.
Our budget,
That's it.
so it's two paths. It's the 5% is what we wanted, what we said we could do, what, you know, it's a stretch, but it's what we could do. And then if it's anything over the 5, it has to be school override. We're just, otherwise we're decimating all, yeah. So
And we reluctantly went to 5, just so as you know, all the other towns are going, all the other departments are going up 3.8, and David suggested we stay at 3.8, and I'm kind of thinking, if we're gonna do a school override, it should be over the percentage that we're giving our other departments, which it should be the difference between 3.8 and 10.3, or whatever number they come to. I don't know that we should go to Whitman's select board's 5% if we're doing an override necessarily. But
Well, it's a bit late in the game for us to have, because we did have the conversation at our last meeting, that we haven't voted on anything, and we certainly could do that. However, the message we've been giving to the Whitman-Hanson School District is 5%.
Okay.
So if we now say, well, if it's anything over 3.8, then it's a school override, I'm,
Yeah, okay, I'll go
you
with
know,
that. Okay,
yeah,
I'll go with that.
I'm not,
Reluctant.
you know, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Gill, I truly do. Mr. Weeks, you've been pensive and extremely quiet. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts.
I have many thoughts, but I think, you know, one of the things that I'm struggling with is just how it how it ironically affects the kids that we're trying to advocate for. So we go to the ballot with something like this. You're putting a lot of stock in the idea that it's going to pass. So right now, by knowing what our number is, and then coming to a place where it's over double that, it puts a lot of people in a position where they have to make some really difficult choices. And I just don't like being in a position like that in the 11th hour. We've been talking about this for a while. I watched, obviously, the school committee meeting, and there were comments around us not coming to the table, no conversations happening. That couldn't be further from the truth. I've been saying over the past, 4 meetings that we should have these conversations, let alone the past year. So we have had those conversations. We have reached out to folks. I was struck by the diversity of people's ideas and backgrounds, and the fact that it was an 8-to-1 vote in favor. So it does signal that people, regardless of their background, are advocating for something like this. I really am concerned, though, and my only thoughts around this come from, what if it doesn't pass at the polls? If it doesn't pass, what happens? And regardless of whether or not it's a operational override or a school override, money's money's, dollars, doesn't matter where it goes. People's taxes are going up. I'm also sympathetic to the idea that the school committee's always put in this really bad place because, unlike us, they need money, but they're not a revenue generating committee. They have to ask us because we're the only ones that can actually generate revenue, even if we don't like it. So I'm balancing that idea, but what I don't like is this all or nothing talking through YouTube videos. I don't like that. I don't like the way that this has gone down over the past 2 months. So
Most times, Mr. Weeks, I can be introspective and say that we could have done something better. I literally would stand before anybody and defy them to say that this board
I agree.
and Ms. Green could have done anything differently. I don't think we could have.
I think everyone that stood up did what they needed to do. I think you did a great job of being, succinct and speaking to the facts of what this would actually look like. At the end of the day, though, we're looking at a little over 14 days, a little over, 3 weeks to come up with a number to try to ask people to come out and vote for. And it really is an all or nothing type of situation. It's either you come out and vote and you bring us to zero baseline, and we're going to be right back to where we are next year. It's just with a higher number at a starting point, or it gets voted down, and then we're looking at apocalyptic scenarios. There's no in between, and that's unfortunate that we're in this situation right now.
I agree. What I really would have hoped for, and perhaps I was being a little bit naive, was in light of the Madden report, and we know that Whitman has had Mr. Madden do a similar exercise for them, that it's clear we need an operational override next year. It's 100% clear. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. There's nobody can say differently. And no matter how, severely we slash things and cripple all the town departments, it's still not going to make up the deficit. So, I think what I had hoped for was that in light of that and knowing that in good faith that the school committee would come down this year a little bit, and that knowing that next year would be able to make up that difference and right the ship for both of us. But it didn't happen. So, this is where we're at. And in all honesty, I would have to say, I agree that it is going to be drastic measures that have to be taken, and that it's a drastic position that we're being put in. But I don't think that we did this. So, we're just trying to do the best we can with what we're being presented.
I do want to double down or triple down at this point. There are no cuts that we can make operationally. There is no fat to trim.
Correct.
It does not exist. And I want people to think about this, because we are put in a position where we have to think significantly about overrides to offset this, because we can't cut it. We can't spend free cash. You're using one-time funds, which will not exist next year. They will not exist. The way it reads right now, we don't have enough free cash to cover. So cuts have to come in some way, shape, or form. But these cuts will come from people that are already just getting to a place where they're actually able to hit their stride and do the services that we need them to do. But in addition, you get what you pay for. If you want high quality people, if you want the grants to be written, if you want the roads to be paved, if you want police officers to be as as professional and as ready as you will ever find a police force and a fire force in this state, you get what you pay for. You're cutting good people that other towns would love to try to poach. And we've had situations where people they've literally stayed here because they've been told that they are so connected to the community, they value the community so much, that even though they have opportunities for more pay or whatever, they choose to stay with us because we treat them right, they're connected to the community, and they want to be part of this. So to put us in a position right now where we have to even look at that is just, it's unfortunate.
And I would say,
And I support the schools 100%. So I know that, so it really puts me in a really bad spot.
and we just had the Collins report last week, looking at compensation. We know we don't have the highest paid employees, but they're committed employees and they're good quality employees. And it isn't because we're paying the highest of anybody around. In fact, it's quite the contrary. So I echo everything that you said, Mr. Weeks, well said. Mrs. Rain, anything? Oh, boy. Okay.
No,
All right.
I think I've kind of said what I feel about it. I really want the school department to look at themselves and see what they can do to bring that number down, because that number is untenable. We can't afford it. I am all for the schools, I'm all for the kids, but I'm also for people being able to stay in town. And I know personally, people that are on the verge of having to sell their homes because they can't afford a tax increase like this. They can't heat their houses. They're elderly and they keep their houses at 55 degrees over the wintertime. And that's not anything that anybody should have to do, but they're doing it because they love their house. They've been in their house for 60, 70 years and they don't want to leave. They shouldn't have to. Nobody should be forced to make that kind of a decision. I think that the schools has enough, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, they have enough fluff in there that they can get rid of some of it. 31 non-educators hired with one-time money is ridiculous. And I don't care what they do at the school. Some of them could go. That's what would have to happen in any department that was facing that kind of a budget.
I'm in agreement with you, and I think that everybody wants kids to be educated. Kids need to be educated. They need a good education. They need a good school. They need what every other school has. But you know what? Because they made a bad business decision, we shouldn't have to pay for it. And them hiring 31 people with one-time money, that's a bad move. That's like me buying a boat and putting it down and costing $20,000, $30,000 to keep it on a slip. You know what? I couldn't afford that, so guess what? Got to get rid of the boat. They got to get rid of the people.
They might not have to get rid of all the people.
They don't have to get rid of them all,
but there's probably something there that they can cut.
Well, we're not really telling them what to do. We're just saying, if you want to keep those people, then maybe you need to look at other ways that you can cut the budget.
Right.
That we're not, it's, not our purview. They've got an elected, committee to do that.
To me, that was a bad business. That was a bad business choice on their side.
And it was just, I guess the towns were just going to have to eat it. Well, the towns, they're on a diet. They can't do it.
It's a huge gamble to see if the town is going to eat it. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
That's what my problem is. It's a huge gamble because I run a school, right? And it's more than just teachers. It's mental health services. It's adjustment counseling. There's so many things that go into a modern day school that didn't exist.
Joe, when does it get to the point that emotional support, mental situations, I got it, kids.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Nowadays, I get it. What about health insurance? They can't go see their doctors and...
I know, I don't disagree.
Why does it all have to take place inside the school?
That's my well, I mean, there's a whole myriad of reasons, but I think in coming back to this, it's like a lot of that stuff, I really wish we had conversations, and because the telephone works both ways, right? Just as much as I'm hearing that we didn't invite them or whatever, where was the hey, I'm going to invite Laura and I'm going to invite we're going to run our own meeting, because I heard loud and clear.
Meeting.
Well, even take that out of it. It's just the idea of like it's a 3-party meeting one of the other two parties, if you felt like you needed to have the meeting, could have been the one to say, we're going to start the meeting, so just come to the meeting. I just feel like, that, you know, despite all of those things, and that's why, the reason why I bring it up is because I am truly sympathetic to this. But it goes back to even with the insurance stuff. We're choosing between, now, our kids having to be able to use their insurance to find health services, to our elderly and fixed income people having to choose whether or not they can use their insurance. It's like, I don't want to be in a position where we have to choose one or the other. And it's just, it's tragic that we're in a position like this. And I felt like we presented something and we made a plea in a way that we felt that everybody kind of had to feel the crunch, and we were all willing to make the sacrifice to feel the crunch. And it just stinks that a week later, we're having to have this conversation.
Didn't they used to come to meetings? Didn't you say that?
Yes, Ruth Gilbert Whitner, when she was the superintendent, was very regular about coming to the meetings, presenting the budget, taking any questions, explaining any increases and any changes that they had. And I don't know when or why that practice fell off, but I've said it before ad nauseum. I really would welcome the school department being treated as though they were another department head. Just like our department heads come and make a case if they need more money, you know, just the same thing, you know, just an open dialogue, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And again, I know we're not the body that votes on their budget, but in the end, we're the ones taking the bullet for the budget. And I will tell you, Mr. Weeks, I feel positively queasy about this situation, and it's not an overstatement to say that. I feel like this is a game of Russian roulette, and I am really afraid of what's going to happen. I think it's a dangerous game. I understand that folks wanted to take a stand, and they've certainly done that, but I can't predict what the outcome's going to be in either of the towns, and it feels extremely uncertain.
We're in a position where we have to be advocates for everybody, and I feel like the ability for us to try to make an informed decision has been taken from us right now. Mm-hmm. And that's really where my issue comes into this.
I hear you.
It's hard for us to make a decision when we feel like a huge chunk of the decision-making has been taken from us.
Right.
So, just wish it was a little bit different.
Yep.
So, but here we are.
Ms. Green, did you want to add any color commentary here? Any additional thoughts?
Well, I mean, from town administrator's standpoint, Mary Beth Carter Whitman and myself are in the same position where we see what this is doing to our personnel, our budgets, the stress and the anxiety. I mean, both of us wanted to say no to this school budget, where they especially didn't even vote to consider using any of their access and deficiency or circuit breaker money. So I know we need to move forward, but just I'm at a loss for words. I really am. I really am.
So I just want to. So we don't. Is it the board's pleasure that we? Well, again, I shouldn't say pleasure. Is it the board's desire that we take a vote next week at our meeting as to, you know, the override and all of that? I mean, I hear where we're leaning, begrudgingly. Lots of impassioned pleas. I hear it, and I feel it, just as you guys do. But I do like what Mr. Sullivan said, which is, you know, perhaps cooler heads will prevail, perhaps some decisions will be made, perhaps some, you know, little kind of inner dialogue will happen, and people will be a little bit more reasonable. And if not, we know what DEFCON is, because this is it right here, we're talking about it. So again, yeah, Mr. Hill.
I just wonder about the timing. You talked about if we start now, it's a lot of work for our folks here. But if we start a week later, it's the same amount of work in a week's shorter time. So which is better?
This is my thought on this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't want to speak for Eric and Lisa, but the work's pretty much already done. It's a matter of just typing it up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no, aside from the work you'd have to do afterwards, which is why Lisa needs to get it to Beth, and Beth leads it in by a certain amount of time. And you really have 2 more meetings to go. before you have to make a decision. I think the 9th is the last meeting
Yeah.
you'll have, so you could run it all the way to the 9th and make a decision on the 9th. That's my 2 cents.
I agree with that. I think, not for nothing, and this might not even be a good idea, but if we had just this, made it available on the website so people actually had information, we're representing our constituents, and they're supposed to be, the school committee also represents similar constituencies. This gives us another week for people to actually advocate for where they think their tax money should be, and that actually is the best form of transparency in community dialogue from my perspective. If we did the form that Eric had put together last time with those different percentages, plus this one, and it just kind of laid out, this is what it looks like, start talking to your representatives and start having an idea of where you think we should be going right now, I think that actually gives us a little bit more time, and not for nothing, hopefully it gives buy-in to the community in one way or another. And I'm not trying to diffuse responsibility, but it really just comes back to like, this is a really important decision, whether it be town meeting or at the polls. Information is going to be key here, and I think we really need to be like in lockstep with what our folks want us to do.
So you want to get this up on the website?
Yeah.
Yeah, with a couple different
I think you said you were
versions.
gonna put it on the
So we can put it
website,
out.
right?
Yeah, we
Bingo,
can work on, putting this in a format and getting it onto the website. We can work on it tomorrow morning.
I
Now,
was thinking like
what-
3.85, 7, 10.2.
Yeah, the various
Right,
scenarios.
yeah.
And then one of the other things that I had talked to Ms. Green about, and I don't know where you guys would be at with this, is like almost a PSA, a conversation, a cable interview where Mr. Kinshirf and Ms. Green just talk about the numbers. No, clutching of pearls, just here's the facts, pretty much going over what you're saying to put on the website. Or I don't know, what other format could we come up with that would allow people to ask the questions that they have? How do we engage people in this conversation besides those little Facebook warriors and keyboard warriors just taking pot shots? How do we engage people in a real conversation about this?
I was going to say, you just go, you get the big sign out here, you tell people to come next week or the week after,
Yeah, tell them.
preferably next week, not the week
Have
after,
like
because you have to make a decision.
FAQ forum or?
Yeah, and then you use Facebook. I mean, we bring up Facebook once a week, I feel like, in some type of dialogue. That's why I don't even bother with it anymore, because I just tend to stay away from it. It's much happier that way. Just go out there, send the links. We do an informational thing, and then we just try to get some buy-in there, because that'll give us an additional week for us to actually, well, we have to make the decision. We just call it a day.
I'm not even necessarily looking for buy-in, I'm looking for feedback. Where are people at?
That's what I mean by buy-in.
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah,
you want people to
Where are
advocate.
people at? I mean, I think at the end of the day, we know what we have to do if things don't change, or what we feel like we have to do. But, I mean, what do you, Ms. Green, what do you guys think about having a forum with a, question and answer type of forum?
1 week from
What could
today.
possibly go wrong with the scenario?
This is what I think. At the end of the day, we're looking at a whole bunch of figures, and we're making decisions that are gonna impact every single person in a real way.
Yeah.
They have no idea what we're talking about. You could read through this right now, you could look at the agenda on the corp board, it doesn't matter. They're not seeing what we're seeing. Give everybody a week to digest what it actually is that we're looking at, because it's all public information, and then we get the feedback that way, just
Ms.
naturally.
Green, can you make this all happen?
We will work very hard. And we no longer have our IT assistant who is very good with graphics, but the three of us will work.
We don't
hard to
really care
get
if it
out
looks
there.
amazing.
Someone else over
We
there
just
is pretty good
We
with
just
graphics.
want it up.
It could just be a photocopy of the thing, honestly,
The
just.
FinCom portion of the town website, there was a town, there was an override calculator. I think that we just broke down by.
Oh, I remember that, yeah. That was, yeah, okay.
So it's not accurate for now. but
Right.
it's
That's a
still
good
there.
tool, though. That's
I think
good.
we just did it as a Excel spreadsheet.
That was awesome, actually. I remember that, because people could put in their own little numbers.
If someone wants to look on the page.
Yeah, maybe we can put a link in there.
Yeah, it was so you could put in what your assessed value was, and then you'd figure out what your amount, your personal increase would be.
I was kind of hoping that there would be more people here tonight that were interested. I'm hoping that there's people on YouTube watching it, so they're hearing it. And that's the best we can, and I'm all for having people
So
come in.
it's the override estimated for fiscal year 2022.
Yeah, that was the
Correct.
last time we did
Yep.
it.
Mhm. Yep.
It hasn't been up.
That's a good point.
Okay,
was
so,
there.
so we'll look at trying to do that. We'll pop this up as well as the other scenarios.
Yep.
And then, let's plan on making, I'm really hesitant to decide what amount of, let's say like a half an hour or 45 minutes of our next meeting.
At the beginning.
You know, we'll tentatively slate for like a FAQ, you know, can we make sure Mr. Kinshirf's going to be here? Because we really need our town accountant to be Johnny on the spot here.
Yeah.
And do you think you might be available to handle those
Yeah, sure.
hard-hitting questions, Mr. Sullivan? Okay, great.
Barring any work.
Okay. Any other thoughts on how we want to I like this idea of trying to get information to people where they're at. Is it possible, thank you, Mr. Sullivan, is it possible for us to also send something into the Express with a link to our town website saying that this information is available on the website, just in case people aren't, you know, on Facebook or watching YouTube at home at 2 a.m. in the morning, or whatever, that, you know, they could link in, they'd get a little something. Again, just factual, like, you know, whatever you want to, you know, the town is contemplating how best to balance the budget, and we've got some information out on the town website, very, like, not, you
I
know.
really just think you just scan these in.
Yep.
Send links and then use that calculator.
Yeah.
All the stuff that we have to be able to make our decisions are things that I think people would be interested
Yeah.
in. None of this stuff is secret, so I think just load them up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll see if we actually missed the deadline for this week's Express. I'll see if maybe they can slide it in tomorrow morning, but if not, it'll
Oh,
be
yeah,
on
good point,
next
because it's
week.
today.
Throw them a Reese's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See if we get
maybe
one.
if you beg, you can,
Eat
Yeah.
the Easter egg
Slide in.
Reese's.
I saw those, but they were not individually wrapped. And then they had the little tiny ones, and I didn't want you yelling at me.
Okay, really?
I want to go on record for something too.
Yes.
I do not think that there are too many people in the select board's office. I just wanted to go on record and say that. That was not my intent.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Rain. And, okay, so we're not going to take a vote tonight on this, but it seems like we're kind of aligned on next steps, so that's amazing. Any further discussion on that?
I think we're good.
Okay, then with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, and we are yet again going into executive session for pursuant to open meeting law, chapter 30A, section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Union negotiations with highway administration, police, and fire. We will not be reconvening in open session. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Aye.
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 Bye.
Okay, thank you very much.